Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Coros Apex and how it stacks up to the newer Coros Pace 2. When the Coros Pace 2 launched, a lot of people thought that the Pace 2 cannibalized a lot of Coros' other options, but that's not entirely true. The Coros Apex still has a lot of features that the Pace 2 doesn't have. That's what we're going to look at today. Full disclosure though, this video is sponsored by Coros, and they did send me all of these watches for the purpose of this video. So in this video, I'm going to try to keep it pretty objective and fact-based and try to leave my opinion out of it as much as possible. That said, I have reviewed both of these watches in the past in different videos, which you can check out up here, and generally I really like both of them, so I'm happy to do this video about comparing the two. In this video, I just want to highlight the features that they have in common and then talk about what the Apex has that the Pace 2 doesn't have, and one feature that the Pace 2 has that the Apex doesn't have. Let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about the options when it comes to picking up either an Apex or a Pace 2. The Coros Pace 2 comes in various different colors, and it also has the different band. You can either get the nylon band that I have here that has sort of a Velcro closure, or you can get the standard silicone band that I don't have with me right now. The nylon band is super comfortable, and it comes in at a much lighter weight, which we'll talk about in a little bit. If you decide on the Apex, you've got two different size options. You've got either the 42mm or the 46mm. And the only difference between these two is going to be the battery life, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The 42mm is a bit smaller, so it's nicer for smaller wrists, and the 46mm is a little bit bigger, but it's also not a big watch by any stretch of the imagination. It's still pretty light and comfortable to wear. When it comes to the design of the actual hardware, they're very similar. You can see that they both have the digital crown up here on the top, and they've also got a single back button below that. Neither the Pace 2 or the Apex is a touchscreen, so you do interact with both with the digital crown or the back button only. The user interface is intuitive, and I do like the digital crown. It makes things really easy to cycle through the different menus. In flipping the two watches over, I've got the Apex on the left and the Pace 2 on the right. You can see that they both have the exact same optical heart rate sensor on the back and the same proprietary charging port. That's just like all of the other Coros watches. Both the Apex and the Pace 2 feature a quick release band, which you can pop off with your fingernail and replace with any that you can find on Amazon or directly from Coros. All right, let's talk about size and weight for a minute. It gets a little bit complicated because of all the different sizes and band materials available here. The larger 46mm Coros Apex comes in at 46mm in diameter around the front here, and it's about 11.9mm thick. The Coros Apex 42 comes in, guess what? 42mm in diameter, and it's also about 11.75mm thick. So pretty similar thickness between the Apex 46 and the Apex 42. And when it comes to the Pace 2, it's nearly identical in size to the smaller Coros Apex 42. It's 42mm in diameter and about 11.7mm thick. And when you've got the Pace 2 and Apex 42 side by side, they're very similar in terms of design. At a distance, they'd be hard to tell apart. In terms of weight between these three watches, there is a difference. The larger 46mm Apex is 55 grams. The smaller 42mm Apex is 49 grams, and the Pace 2 is 35 grams, which is really light. One of the major differences between the Coros Apex and the Pace 2 is going to be the build quality. When it comes to the Pace 2, it's entirely made out of plastic. The bezel's plastic, the case is plastic, the back material is plastic, except for the charger. That's the only bit of metal there. The buttons on the Pace 2 are also plastic, and the display is a Corning mineral glass. This is a good and bad thing. It does mean it's a little bit less durable, but it also lends to its really light nature. When it comes to the Apex 42 and 46, they both have excellent build quality. You can see that the bezel material is actually titanium, and the back material is aluminum. The buttons on the Apex are also a stainless steel, and they feel really nice to click, and the lens itself is actually a sapphire crystal, which is incredibly hard to scratch. It's actually pretty rare to find a sapphire display in a watch at this price point, and we'll talk about price a little bit later in this video. Both the Apex and the Pace 2 are waterproof. However, the Apex is waterproof down to 100 meters, while the Pace 2 is only waterproof down to 50 meters. That said, neither of these watches are designed for diving in particular, but they can be used for swimming, open water, pool swimming, anything like that. In terms of the actual displays between the Pace 2 and Apex watches, they're identical again. These both feature the same transflective display that's excellent to view in direct sunlight, and they both feature backlights for viewing in dark situations. The Pace 2 and Apex 46mm offer a 1.2-inch display, while the 42mm Apex has a 1.1-inch display. It is hard to see a difference between 1.1 1 and 1.2 inch display, but it is there between the 42mm Apex and the Pace 2. One unique feature to the Pace 2 is something called night mode. This essentially leaves the backlight on 100% of the time at a very low output. This is handy if you're in a dark situation like an ultra marathon running overnight and you want to be able to see your watch at a glance without relying on the gesture-based backlight. It's a pretty cool feature, and it's only available on the higher end Coros VERTIX and Apex Pro and on the Pace 2. Unfortunately, this feature is not available on the Apex. When it comes to sensors between the Coros Apex and the Pace 2, they're very similar again. Both watches support GPS plus GLONASS, QZSS, and Beidou. We'll talk about GPS accuracy later on in this video. Both the Pace 2 and Apex can also pair with Ant Plus or Bluetooth accessories like power meters and heart rate straps and just about anything else out there. Both the Apex and Pace 2 feature a barometric altimeter, which is nice to be able to see your elevation at a glance while you're mid-activity. Both watches do feature an accelerometer and a gyroscope, which helps improve GPS accuracy when you're using one of the power saver modes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And as mentioned before, they both have a heart rate sensor on the back, and these both can provide a heart rate reading while swimming, which is kind of rare these days with these kinds of devices. And so far, you might be saying to yourself that these are pretty darn similar, and you'd be right. The bigger difference is the build quality over on the Apex, but it also has a few other unique features. So one of the big differences between the Coros Apex and the Pace 2 is actually the activities that you can capture with these watches. The Coros Pace 2, as the name implies, is kind of a dedicated running watch, so it omits a few activities that you get with the Apex. On the Pace 2, you do get a lot of activities, and it'll probably cover all the bases for you. You've got things like run, indoor run, track run, bike, indoor bike, pool swim, and open water. On top of that though, there is actually a triathlon mode on the Pace 2, which is kind of unheard of at this price point. On top of that, you've also got profiles for strength training, gym cardio, GPS cardio, and these are kind of a catch-all for activities that they don't have listed here. Then you've got rowing, indoor rowing, flat water, that's kind of a stand-up paddleboarding, I think. And then you've got your training and training plan options here. Now, if we look at the Coros Apex, we've got all of the activities that I just listed on the Pace 2, but we've got a few more. Specifically, we've got a dedicated hiking activity, and we've got activities for winter sports, like skiing, snowboarding, cross-country skiing, and ski touring. Both the Coros Apex and Pace 2 are compatible with Coros's new strength training program. Actually, I have a whole video that I recorded a while back about strength training with Coros watches, and I'll link that up here so you can watch it if you're interested. I won't dive too deep on that in this video, but they can both do it, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's talk about battery life. That's where these Coros devices shine, right? The larger Coros Apex 46mm watch can get up to 30 days in smartwatch or standby mode, or up to 35 hours in GPS activity with the heart rate sensor turned on. You can also turn on Ultramax mode and bump up to 100 hours in a GPS activity at the sacrifice of some GPS accuracy. The smaller Apex 42mm offers 24 days in smartwatch or standby mode, up to 25 hours in a GPS activity, or up to 80 hours with Ultramax turned on. And the Pace 2 here offers up to 20 days in smartwatch or standby mode, up to 30 hours in GPS activity mode, or up to 60 hours with Ultramax turned on. What's interesting is that the Apex 42mm actually has a bit better standby time and Ultramax time over the Pace 2, but the Pace 2 has a few more hours in GPS activity mode. That's to say the smaller Apex 42 and the Pace 2 are pretty darn similar in terms of battery life. But you do get a lot more battery life if you decide to step up to the 46mm Apex. One massive difference between the Coros Apex and the Pace 2 is going to be navigation features. On the Coros Apex, you can download a GPX file and upload it to your watch and follow that course in real time on a breadcrumb map. This is incredibly helpful if you're doing something like an ultra marathon where you want to make sure that you're on course into the night. You can glance down at your watch and make sure you're on track. It's a really helpful feature. And Coros actually implemented this really nicely, and it's really easy to get a course uploaded to the watch itself through the app. And that's where you make a sacrifice with the Coros Pace 2. This watch does not feature any navigation features at all. The Coros Apex can actually do a return to start, where if you get lost and you're out on a trail run or something, you can hit return to start and it'll guide you back to the beginning of your activity, which can be helpful in some situations. When it comes to GPS accuracy, this can get a little subjective, so I'm going to try to keep this as objective as possible. I will say that the Apex and the Pace 2 are nearly identical in this department. Both watches usually result in the same distance at the end of my runs, and when I overlay them on a map, there's really no huge discrepancies between the two. There can be little minor things here and there, but there's nothing major. They're very similar to all of my other test devices, and that's to say pretty good overall. Again, not trying to share my opinion here, just trying to go from the facts and what I've seen in my testing so far. In terms of heart rate accuracy, again, they're pretty darn similar. However, I will say that I've gotten slightly better results from from the Pace 2 than the Apex 46mm, and I think that has something to do with the size and weight of the watch. You really got to make sure you strap these things down, because if they bounce around on your wrist, you can get minor deviations in your data. But if you want really good, reliable, repeatable data, I would get a chest band or a Bluetooth armband to pick up your heart rate just a little bit better. Like I said before, the Coros Apex and Pace 2 do support external sensors like power meters, and they are both natively supported by Stride's FootPod, and that's really cool for getting that running power data. The Pace 2, along with the Apex, also can provide running power data from the wrist itself without even using something like a Stride pod, which is pretty unique. And surprisingly, the running power data coming from the Pace 2 and the Apex is pretty darn accurate when I compare it to something like the Stride pod. That said, there's really no standard for running power yet, but it's pretty comparable to the data I see from the Stride pod, and that's a good sign. Now that we've talked about all the differences between the Pace 2 and the two Apex models, let's talk about price. The Coros Pace 2 comes in at $199. The smaller Coros Apex 42 comes in at $299, and the larger 46mm Apex comes in at $349. I'm really trying to keep my opinion out of this video, but at $199, the Pace 2 is an incredible value for what you're getting here. That said, if you want a more robust build quality, you want the navigation features, you want a little bit more battery life, and you want those extra activity profiles, the Coros Apex is still a great buy. The choice is kind of up to you. What features do you need? Do you really like the premium look of the Apex, or are you happy with the plastic build of the Pace 2? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear from you. These are really different tools for different people. If you're really just a runner and you go to the track a lot, you're not really doing anything crazy like hiking or winter sports or anything like that, or you're just not tracking them, the Pace 2 is a great option. But if you're a hiker, ultramarathoner, people who would utilize the navigation features and those extra activity profiles and more rugged build quality, I think the Apex is a great choice as well. Okay, I think I've exhausted this conversation. If you found this video helpful, please hit that thumbs up button down below and consider subscribing so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. And again, if you're interested in picking up any of these watches, you can find links for those down in the description, and those do help support my channel, but it costs nothing extra to you. Okay, I think I'm done now. Bye.